My name is Brenda Morrison. I'm the director of the Center for Restorative Justice at Simon Fraser University, which sits within the criminology department. I've served on the advisory board of BC Victims of Homicide since its inception, and it's an honor to do so. So thanks for coming today. And I'm here to talk about restorative justice. A lot of people, restorative justice is one of my interests. My main interest is all forms of justice: adversarial justice, retributive justice, I'm an academic, I could go on about that. But I'm really interested in the intersections of all these forms of justice, and in particular I'm interested in why people seek justice and how we deliver justice. 25 years ago, a fellow by the name of Howard Zier wrote a book, and it plays on our camera sort of metaphor. He wrote a book called Changing Lenses. And it's about changing the lens around crime and harm and safety in our community, because at a state-based level, they deliver one form of justice. And in that process, the two main players are the state and the alleged offender. Often victims get marginalized in that, because technically, even though many of the people here are here to serve you, technically the crime is against the state. And so restorative justice tries to address that in different ways, because restorative justice aims to be more victim-centered. So between the two of them, we start with different questions. So from a state-based point of view, we ask, what law has been broken, who did it, and what do they deserve? Those are really important questions. And in answering those questions to the best of their ability, the people who represent the state, the gold in the equation is the evidence and the facts. Very, very important to uphold. From a restorative justice process, which typically is not state-based, it's community-based, so it's delivered by community justice initiatives, as Tara rightly pointed out. So really, one way forward in terms of delivering justice is how does the state work better with the community in delivering justice. So from a restorative justice or community-born and led point of view, we ask a bunch of different questions. We ask who has been harmed, what are their needs, and whose obligation is it to deliver those needs. And they're operationalized in many different ways. A state-based process is often very linear. It's really getting the procedural justice part of that right is really important. So the police have to do their job. From the police, we move into the courts, and the Crown, of course, represents the state. And then from there, we move on to corrections. It's a very linear, procedurally just process. It's very important. From a restorative justice point of view, and those who have participated in a restorative justice process, we often think of a circle process or sitting in church. It's not linear. Each of you are on a very singular journey that often feels like it's going in circles. So it's how do we put these linear processes together with processes that support people in different ways. And we often think of restorative justice processes as circle-based processes that bring all of us together in our common humanity to support each other in different ways. And so the process looks very different. In a state-based process, because we're focusing on the facts, we separate reason from emotion. We ask for order in the court, for example. Separating reason from emotion is important to a linear state-based process. In a restorative justice process, we find reason for emotion. The emotional leverage is really important in moving forward in your healing journey. And so it's the interplay of these two processes that are really important. In a state-based process, there's a lot of third-party decision-making. That's important within the design of that state-based process. In a restorative justice process, it's more about first-party decision-making. And that's what most people think about when it comes to restorative justice. So often with that backdrop, when we think about restorative justice, we often think about the victim-offender encounter. But there's much more to it than that. And for me, community-based processes like BC Victims of Homicide is restorative. It really aids our state-based system in doing the work that it does. So we often think of it as this victim-offender encounter. And the way that it's operationalized or comes into play in British Columbia, it's sort of at the two extremes of our justice system. So we have many community-based restorative justice groups throughout communities in British Columbia. We have 70 different ones, Aboriginal and here in the Lower Mainland, servicing different communities. And they're usually police diversions for low-level offending of juveniles away from the court system. And so that's one way that we operationalize it. But the one that's relevant here is the victim offender mediations that the Correctional Service of Canada holds up through community justice initiatives. And that typically happens after the state has done their job, that victims decide that they want to meet the person that's caused such harm, that person holds maybe information that the court hasn't come out in a court-based process. A court-based process, their primary goal is to determine guilt or innocence. And sometimes there's little truths that don't come out in that process. And that's the information that only the offender holds. And so that's one reason that some people seek restorative justice, because they want answers to that questions. Sometimes that's a face-to-face encounter, but there's also something called shuttle mediation. So you work through the mediator to get the information that you want from the offender that didn't come out in the court process.